COSI has been around for over 52 years, 53 years. 1964 is when we opened. My name is Kelley, and I work with the volunteers that teach on the floor. I'm the manager of the floor experienced volunteers at COSI. And we've always had a place for our youth volunteers. And back then, really there wasn't much for youth volunteers at all to volunteer. And so it was mostly a place to come, have fun, geek out, serve, teach science, have fun. But over the years, we had to change a few things, and so we have what we call it our volunteer experience, and where they're serving, there's the base level serving, but then they start going through programs. So our youth volunteers have stars that we manage. These are responsibility levels. Then there's leadership opportunities as well that they'll get to do, and eventually working to a paid position. I'll talk a little bit about those as we go along. But one of the things that we've always strived to do is try to make sure that we're relevant for them. And most recently we've talked about the idea of being a critical player in community development, being something where we're giving back to our community's youth in this regard. And the 21st century skills that we see that we're needing to do involve communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity. These are the things that we've noticed that they're not getting prepared for in schools. So we've had to think a few things. We've noticed that, one, not many youth are really taking advantage of this. Right? They would come and they would do things, but they're not taking advantage of what we have to offer. We also noticed that many volunteers came from the suburbs and not really from our inner city schools, Columbus City School District. They were being onboarded as team members throughout the year, and so it made it hard to keep up with implementing our program, but also helping them along the way with trainings and making sure that they were on top of things. The structure that we had is one team meant that the youth volunteers and the adult volunteers would be onboarded with our paid team members, and so it was a big mix, and we were having them twice a month, and so they would just come along and catch on as they could, and we found out that that's just not really working for our team, our youth. So some of the things that we thought of solutions would be to assign the curricular ladder tasks. Assign them such that so they wouldn't just wait for them. We used to think, well, they'll want to do this. Not necessarily. Let's assign them some of these tasks to help them along the way. We created some organizational tools, like the star tracking sheets or their quizzes to make sure that they know what's going along the way. Where do they fall in their list of things to do to help them move along. We limited our onboarding to 2 times a year. So that means 2 interview sets a year, 2 onboarding sets a year. Bringing them on as a group, kind of like a cohort, and conducted some targeted recruitment into our inner city schools. So specific schools for a test, and that actually brought up our numbers, of course. At that point, they would say, yeah, a guy came out, or yeah, Carla came out to our school, that's how we found out about this. And so that did bring us up our numbers, which was really nice. The results from this was really helpful, because what it did was it made it easier to train our new volunteers. It really did. Besides being the camaraderie of being, this is their class, or this is our cohort, they don't use that word, but we did. But their class, these are my friends coming in together. But it was still difficult to get them through the orientation. So that was something that we had to change as well, was that we had to redesign our orientation specifically for the youth. See, what we had before were some trainings. Our orientation used to be 2 days. Then it became 2 hours. And we took those big pieces and put it into separate workshops for our youth. It was difficult to get them through that. So now we've made our youth volunteer trainings and orientations 5 hours long, where they get those trainings to help them be proficient at what they're doing here at COSI. We've also made it so that they help them along with the interview process. Our lead volunteers, as you saw on that earlier chart, the lead volunteers wanted to participate, but we didn't have much for them. Now they help lead those interviews. The lead volunteers come in and help, and it gives them this, it's like an ownership of, we want to help select the next generation coming in. We want to help select the ones that we're going to be mentoring. And so they come in and they do this. It gives them this purpose for that. With our apprentices, as you can see in some of these slides, they're leading some of these extra trainings. We tasked them to create trainings for our professional development levels to help those lead volunteers then become more effective at being leaders and mentors. And so they created workshops on finance, personal finance. What do you do with your money now that you have a job? Or what are you going to do to save for college? We created leadership and mentoring workshops where they're learning how to think about leadership, not just as, well, I'm in charge now, but no, I'm not just in charge. I'm actually serving these folks that I'm leading through. And so that's been helpful for them to see this. The frustrations that we took when we had some of these trainings that were tied to achieving these various levels, we took those workshops out. And by incorporating them into our initial orientation, then so that they could get those trainings, it's made them want to be there and excited to excel, becoming more and more responsible. Because then they get to do more things, of course, but they see themselves as leaders. And that's something, the biggest thing that we take home from our parent surveys that we've been getting is that the parents are now saying, our kids, we never thought of our kids being able to do something like this. Our kids were never interested in being a leader, and now they are. Or wanting to be a presenter or stand up in front of somebody to speak to them about things, and now they are. And so that's something that that was the biggest take home for us as we've been building into them to give them these skills so that they want to do this, but then they see that it's successful for them. And the parents too really push it forward. And there you have it. That's all I have. Next.